and welcome back to Brush and Bubbles and another painting tutorial. Today we are going to be painting an English flower meadow with some bunting. So you can pick any shades and colours and flowers that you wish, and also you can change up the colours of the bunting to suit whatever you want. But I will just be showing you what I'm doing here on mine, and you can go wild with your own painting. So what we're going to need for this is just to cover up your table or your furniture with some tablecloth or some old newspaper. You'll need a canvas. I've got an 8x10 canvas here, a palette for your paints. I've got a couple of different sized brushes. I've got a medium square shaped one and then a pointy one for all of the details. Some kitchen towel, a cup of water, and then some acrylic paint. I'm actually using the paint that comes in our latest art kit, but all you really need for this painting is the primary colours and some white and maybe a tiny bit of black. So as long as you've got some of those, you will be all good to go. So without further ado, let's get started.
So I've got here some white, blue, 3 shades of green, some red, yellow and a tiny bit of black. Like I mentioned, don't worry if you haven't got different shades of green. You can actually make green using blue and yellow, and you could mix up blue, yellow and white, blue, yellow and black. If you have got some green, you can mix it with some yellow or blue or white or black. You can have a little experiment with your different shades of green colours. So to start with, we just want to draw in where our meadow ends and our sky starts. So we're just going to pick up our small brush and we're just going to mix up a very light blue colour. So I'm going to pick up some white paint and then I'm going to move over some blue on top, mix it in. When you're happy with that light blue shade, all we're going to do is just move over to your canvas, and about 3/4 of the way down, you just want to draw a line all the way across here. Don't worry if it's not neat, we're going to cover it all up. Just get that in there and then also wrap it around the sides. Once you're happy with that, we're now just going to move over to our medium brush. So what we're going to do is just create a colour for the top section of our sky. So we want this to be the sort of darkest section because we're then going to graduate it down so it goes a bit lighter. So what I would do to the shade with your medium brush is just pick up some more blue, give it a good mix in, and maybe pick up a little bit of white as well. When you're happy with that shade, what we're going to do is add this to about half of the section of our sky. So we want to bring it down to about there, and then what we're going to do is lighten it up and bring it down to the horizon line. So just get this paint on that top section of your canvas. Once you've painted that top section, all we're going to do now is lighten up this blue slightly. So we're just going to add a little bit of white to it and give it a good mix. Once you're happy that your shade is slightly lighter than your previous blue shade, what we're going to do now is blend this colour into this last shade. So to do this, what I do is just paint a line underneath this line. Get all the paint off your brush. And once you're happy that most of it is off of your brush, you can then start blending in the paint and overlapping that previous shade. Now, the trick here is not to be afraid of painting over your last blue colour, because this is where you'll get that nice blended gradient in your sky. So just keep going backwards and forwards along your canvas with your paintbrush until you're happy with the blending. You can then paint this lighter shade all the way down to your horizon line. Once you are happy with your sky, we're now going to move on to our meadow. So all we want to do is paint this green because we're going to be covering it up with loads of different shades. So I would just pick up, you don't even have to wash your brush off, you can just pick up some green paint. And like I said, if you haven't got green, you can just make some using blue and yellow. So I'm going to pick up some green and I'm actually going to add a little bit of blue to it and a tiny bit of white and give it a good mix. What we're now going to do with this shade is just paint the whole of this bottom section with this colour. And when you get to the sky, you can overlap it slightly, but don't worry too much about it because we're going to be covering it up with our grasses. Once you've covered up all of the bottom, we're just going to leave it to dry before we move on to the next bit. What we're now going to do is move on to mixing up loads of different shades for our grass. So for this, you just want your smaller brush, and I have got 3 different shades of green here, but I'm going to mix up my own as well. So I'm going to mix them up with some blue and yellow. And then I'm also going to pick up some of this green I've got here, and I'm going to add some white to it to make a nice light shade of green. So what we're going to do is do a little dance between all of our different green shades and create all these grasses on our meadow. So what I would suggest doing is every time you pick up some green, I would suggest adding some water to it. And what I do is I don't actually clean off my brush when I pick up the different shades. I just sort of go for it. So what I would do is add the water as you go, because the more fluid your paint is, the easier it is to draw nice, crisp reeds and grasses. So what we want to start doing is just flicking the paintbrush up. We want to make sure we're covering up this line. We don't want to see any of that line. We can add these grasses all the way in this whole section. We want to make sure we can't really see any of the background. It's there just to give us a block colour, but we want to add all of these reeds and grasses so our meadow looks nice and healthy and green. So what I would do is just start picking up your different colours. You can have an experiment, just keep going between them, making sure you're adding the water to them as you go, and just start overlapping these grasses here. You might have some that come up a little bit higher. I'm only pushing down very lightly with my brush as well, but we just want to start building up the meadow. Once you've covered up your whole meadow with lots of crisscrossing different shades of grass, we're now going to move on to our bunting. So I would just give your little brush a very good wash. What I'm just going to do now is mix up a nice light blue shade to actually just draw in the hoop of my bunting. So for this, I'm just going to pick up a little bit of white paint, move it over to the dish I had with my blue, and I'm going to add a tiny bit of blue to this and mix it up. So what we want to do with this light shade is just carefully draw in where our bunting is going to go. So I'm just going to have mine coming off the sides of the canvas, looping down in the middle. So you just want to draw that in carefully now. Once you've got your hoop of your bunting in there, we're now just going to map in where our little flags are going to go. And we want to do this with pure white paint and make them nice and thick, because then we can go in with our colour and we have a nice thick white paint base to paint over. So again, just wash off your little brush and then we're going to pick up some white. So we just want to start drawing in where we want our bunting to go, and I'm just going to do mine quite small because you can always make them bigger. And I'm just going to start drawing in little triangles coming off of the string where we've just drawn that hoop in. Don't worry if they're not neat, if they're not completely straight. You know, these are material buntings, so they can be flapping in the wind and going in different directions, so don't worry too much about them. I would just start drawing them in. You can make them a little bit bigger if you wish. I'd also fill them in as well and just place them all the way along this line. I've given my bunting a couple of layers of white, and now what we're going to do is move on to our flowers. So while we wait for that to dry, we'll move on to our flowers and then we can add any colour that we want to our bunting. So for this, I'm just going to use my small brush, and you can do any shape of flowers that you like. I think I'm going to start with loads of daisies, just because I love daisies. I think they're really cute and I think it'll go nicely with this painting. But please feel free to do any shape and colour that you wish. To do daisies, all I do is with my small brush and some white paint, is I just start in the middle, do a little dot so I know where that is, and then I just very carefully add the petals a little bit like a star shape, always starting from the middle of the flower and just bringing them around. You can do as many as you like. We'll then go in and add a little yellow dot to the middle of all of them. If you want to, you can add some other flowers in there for a pop of colour. You could do tulips or you could do poppies, anything that you like, but just fill loads of flowers into your meadow. A little tip with this is just use the very end of your brush. So I'm hardly pushing down at all, if you can see. And this just helps you create nice thin petals when you come to do your flowers. Once you've painted in all your flowers, we're now going to move back to our bunting. So this is the fun bit, because you can just decide what colours you want to do. I'm going to go for red, blue and white, and I'm just going to alternate them along. And all we want to do is very carefully just add in the colour on top of the white, and if you want to leave any white then you can. You can do spots or stripes or a pattern, you could do flags, anything that you like goes, but just pick your colours and carefully to start to fill them in. When you're happy with your bunting, we're just going to wash off our little brush. We're going to move back on to our flowers. So I just want to fill in all of the eyes of my daisies. So I just want to pick up a little bit of yellow paint, but I'm going to add a tiny bit of white to it as well, just to make it a little bit more opaque. All I'm going to do now is dot on the eyes to the middle of my daisies. So you can just literally do a tiny little blob in the eye of each flower. Again, you can choose any colour that you wish for this depending on your flowers. You might even want to add more different shapes of flowers. Just feel free to go wild with your flower meadow.
So once you have finished adding in all of the flowers that you want to your painting, you have then finished your British summertime meadow painting. Yay! I hope you all enjoyed that. Have a lovely weekend. Bye!